what happened next in a Dallas grocery store on an ordinary Tuesday evening would shock everyone who witnessed it. But first, you need to understand how a billionaire and a struggling single father's paths crossed over something as simple as a gallon of milk. The automatic doors of the Fresh Mart grocery store slid open as Marcus Blake walked in, his expensive leather shoes clicking softly against the tile floor. At 51 years old, Marcus was a founder of Blake Technologies, a software empire worth $3 billion. Tonight, he wore jeans and a casual button-down shirt, his way of feeling normal for an hour, of pretending he was just another person buying groceries instead of a man whose decisions affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. He grabbed a basket and moved through the store on autopilot. Organic coffee, artisan bread, imported cheese. The kinds of things you buy when price tags have stopped matching decades ago. That's when Marcus noticed him. A man stood at the self-checkout, maybe 35 years old, wearing a work shirt with a name patch that read David and the logo of a local plumbing company. His jeans were worn but clean, his boots scuffed from honest work. But it was his face that caught Marcus's attention. The man looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from working too many hours and sleeping too few. Beside him stood a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with her father's dark eyes and a gap-toothed smile. She wore a school uniform that was slightly too small, the hem of her skirt hitting higher than it should, sleeves ending before her wrists. She clutched a small stuffed rabbit that had clearly been loved to the edge of falling apart. Marcus watched as David scanned his items at the self-checkout. A loaf of store-brand bread, a jar of peanut butter, some pasta and sauce, mac and cheese boxes, the basics, budget groceries. At the end, David scanned a gallon of whole milk, the kind kids need for growing bones. The machine beeped. Please insert your card. David inserted his debit card. The machine thought for a moment, then flashed red. Card declined. Please try another payment method. Marcus saw David's shoulder sag. Saw him try the card again, his jaw tight with tension. Again the red flash. Card declined. The little girl tugged on her father's shirt. Daddy? Is something wrong? It's okay, sweetie, David said, his voice steady despite the tremor Marcus detected underneath. Daddy just needs to fix something. David pulled out his phone, checked his banking app, and his face went pale. Marcus couldn't see the screen, but he could read the devastation in David's expression. Whatever he'd been counting on being in that account wasn't there. Marcus watched as David did the mental math, his eyes scanning the groceries already bagged. Then, with shaking hands, he reached into the bag and pulled out the gallon of milk, the most expensive single item in his cart. Excuse me, David said to the attendant who'd noticed the issue. I need to return this. Can you take it off my total? The attendant, a teenage girl who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, sighed and nodded. She processed a return, and this time, when David tried his card, it went through $11.43 for groceries that would have to feed 2 people for at least several days. But no milk. Daddy, what about the milk? The little girl asked, her voice small and confused. You said we could get milk today. You promised. David knelt down to his daughter's level, forcing a smile that broke Marcus's heart. I know, sweetheart, but you know what? Milk is expensive, and we have orange juice at home. That's just as good, right? But I like milk with my cereal, the girl said, not whining, just stating a fact with the honest disappointment of childhood. I know you do, Emma, but sometimes we have to make different choices. We'll get milk next week, okay? I promise, when Daddy gets paid. Emma nodded, accepting this with a quiet understanding of a child who'd learned not to ask for things her father couldn't provide. She took her father's hand, and together they walked toward the exit, David carrying their single small bag of groceries. Marcus stood frozen in the produce section, his basket of expensive items suddenly feeling obscene. He watched the scene unfold, and something shifted deep in his chest. A memory, locked away for 40 years, suddenly surfaced with painful clarity. He was 6 years old, standing in a grocery store with his own father. His mother had died the year before, and his father was doing his best, working construction and raising a son alone. Marcus remembered watching his father count change at the register, remembered the shame on his father's face when he'd had to return items they couldn't afford. And he remembered the milk. Always the milk. The thing his father would put back because it was expensive and they could do without it. Even though 6-year-old Marcus had loved milk with his cereal just like Emma did. Marcus had promised himself, standing in that store 40 years ago, that when he grew up, he'd never be so poor that he had to return milk. He'd kept that promise. He'd built an empire. He'd become a billionaire. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be the person returning the milk. He'd forgotten his father's face. He'd forgotten his own childhood shame. He'd forgotten to look at people like David and Emma and see himself. Until now, Marcus made a decision. He abandoned his basket right there in the produce section and walked quickly to the front of the store. David and Emma were already out the door, walking to the parking lot toward an old pickup truck that had clearly seen better days. Marcus found the store manager, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, according to her name badge. "I need you to help me with something. Quickly. It's important." Marcus and Patricia worked fast. Within 5 minutes, they'd assembled a cart full of groceries. Not just necessities, but good food, fresh vegetables, and fruit. Quality proteins, whole grain bread, eggs and cheese, milk, a gallon of whole milk. But Marcus didn't stop there. He added things a little girl would love. A box of her favorite cereal that he'd guessed at based on the cartoon character on her backpack. Cookies, juice boxes, fruit snacks, things that made childhood a little sweeter. "Charge it to this," Marcus said, handing Patricia his Black American Express card, "and add another $200 in store gift cards. But I need you to do something else. Don't tell them my name. Say it's from the store's community kindness program or something. Make up whatever you need to. Just don't tell them it's from me." Patricia looked at him with knowing eyes. She'd worked retail for 20 years. She'd seen plenty of declined cards and returned milk. "You're a good man," she said. "No," Marcus replied, thinking of his father. "I'm just trying to remember how to be human." They loaded everything into a cart, and Marcus pushed out into the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful and indifferent to the small human dramas playing out below. David was loading his single small bag into the truck bed when Marcus approached. Emma sat in the front seat, visible through the windshield, hugging her worn rabbit. "Excuse me," Marcus called out. "David." David turned, immediately defensive. A stranger approaching in a parking lot, especially after what had just happened inside, put him on guard. "Can I help you?" "I was in the store," Marcus said, keeping his distance, keeping his voice gentle. "I saw what happened at the checkout, and I want to do something about it. If you'll let me." David's eyes went to the cart full of groceries, then back to Marcus's face. "I don't understand." "The store has a program," Marcus said, the lie coming easily because it served a greater truth. "A community kindness initiative. We help local families who are going through tough times. I manage the program, and I'd like to offer you these groceries. No strings, no paperwork, just help." David stared at the cart, his throat working as he tried to process what was happening. "I can't accept that. I don't take charity." "It's not charity," Marcus said firmly. "My own father was a single dad, raised me alone after my mom died. I remember watching him return milk at grocery stores because we couldn't afford it. I remember what that felt like. So this isn't charity. This is someone who remembers what you're going through, offering help." David's eyes filled with tears. He blinked back furiously. I work hard, 60 hours a week. But my ex-wife, she drained our joint account before she left, took everything, left me with Emma and $15 until Friday. I thought I had more in the account, but she took it all. I'm trying. I'm doing everything right, but it's not enough. His voice broke on the last word, and Marcus felt his own eyes sting. You're a good father, Marcus said quietly. Emma's lucky to have you. The fact that you're working 60 hours a week and still trying, still showing up for her, that's not failing. That's heroism. Take the groceries. Feed your daughter. And when you're back on your feet, help someone else who's struggling. That's all I ask. David wiped his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. Why are you doing this? Because 40 years ago, someone did something similar for my father and me. A stranger at a grocery store saw us struggling and helped. I never forgot it, and I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I'd do the same for someone else. Marcus started unloading the groceries into the truck bed, not giving David a chance to refuse. David joined him after a moment, the two men working in silence. When they got to the milk, Marcus handed it to David. For Emma, Marcus said, every kid deserves milk with their cereal. David took the milk, and a sob escaped him before he could stop it. Thank you. God, thank you so much. You don't know what this means. I do know, Marcus said. That's why I'm here. Emma climbed out of the truck, drawn by the commotion. She saw the groceries, and her eyes went wide. Daddy, what's all this? David knelt down, pulling his daughter into a tight hug. This nice man helped us, sweetheart. We have groceries now. Real groceries. And milk. We have milk. Emma looked at Marcus with the solemn gratitude of children who understand more than adults think they do. Thank you, mister. Can I give you a hug? Marcus felt his composure crack. He nodded, and this little girl who reminded him so much of himself at that age wrapped her small arms around his waist and squeezed tight. You're welcome, Emma, Marcus managed to say. Enjoy your milk. Marcus drove home to his mansion in the affluent part of Dallas, but the house felt emptier than usual. His ex-wife had left 5 years ago, tired of being married to a man who loved his work more than his family. His 2 adult children lived in other states and called maybe once a month. He'd built an empire, but somehow lost the things that actually mattered. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept seeing David's face, Emma's gap-toothed smile. The gallon of milk, that meant everything. And he kept thinking about his own father, who died 10 years ago without ever seeing Marcus's success, without knowing that his son had kept his promise to never be poor again. But had Marcus kept the right promise? He'd promised never to be poor. But what about the other promise, the unspoken one? To never forget what it felt like? To always help others who were struggling? That promise had gotten lost somewhere between his first million and his first billion. The next morning, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He canceled his meetings and drove back to Fresh Mart. He found Patricia, the manager, and asked for the store's records of declined transactions over the past month. She shouldn't have given them to him, but something about Marcus's intensity made her pull the reports. 43 declined transactions in 1 month. 43 David and Emma's. 43 families trying to buy groceries and not having enough. 43 moments of shame and returned items and promises to children about next time. Marcus made another decision. He created a fund. A real fund this time, not a made-up story. $500,000 deposited with Fresh Mart to cover declined transactions. Anytime someone's car was declined for groceries, the difference would be covered by the fund. Automatically. Invisibly. No shame. No returns. Just help. But he didn't stop there. Marcus started visiting other grocery stores across Dallas. He set up similar funds in 12 different locations. Then he expanded to other cities where his company had offices. Houston, Austin, San Antonio. Each location got a fund. Each fund helped real people. Over the following weeks, Marcus tracked the numbers. 400 families helped in the first month, 800 in the second. People who have had to return milk or bread or baby formula were able to walk out of stores with dignity intact and their groceries complete. But something else happened that Marcus didn't expect. Reading the thank you notes that cashiers collected, hearing the stories of the people his funds were helping, changed him. He started asking questions about his own company. How much were his lowest paid employees making? Was it enough? Could they afford groceries without worry? The answers shocked him. His company paid minimum wage to janitors and cafeteria workers and security guards, people who worked 40 hours a week for Blake Technologies and still struggled to buy milk for their children. Marcus had become the wealthy man who forgot to see the struggling people right in front of him. He'd become the person who walked past his father and his 6-year-old self. He implemented immediate changes. Minimum wage at Blake Technologies became $25 an hour. Health insurance became free for all employees. He created an emergency assistance fund for employees facing financial crises. His board protested. His CFO warned him about profit margins. Marcus didn't care anymore about profit margins. He cared about whether the people who worked for him could afford milk. 3 months after that night in the Fresh Mart parking lot, Marcus received a letter at his office. It was handwritten on simple line paper, clearly written by a child. Dear nice grocery man, thank you for helping my dad and me. We have food now and I get milk every day with my cereal. Dad got a better job and says things are better. I drew you a picture. It's you and me and Dad and milk. Thank you for being nice. Love, Emma. The drawing was exactly what she described. 3 stick figures holding hands, with a giant milk carton in the middle. Marcus had it framed and hung it in his office, right next to his business awards and achievements. But there was something else in the envelope. A note from David. Marcus Blake, I figured out who you really are. Took me a while, but I Googled Blake Technologies Dallas and saw your face. You're not a store manager. You're a billionaire. And you helped me anyway. You treated me with dignity when you could have made me feel small. Thank you. I got a better job, better pay, and Emma and I are doing okay now. But I'll never forget what you did. You saved us. I hope this note finds you well. Yours in gratitude, David. Marcus sat at his desk, holding the letter and the drawing, and cried. Really cried, for the first time in decades, because David had reminded him of something crucial. Wealth wasn't about accumulation. Success wasn't about empire building. It was about using what you had to help others, about seeing people instead of walking past them, about remembering where you came from even when you climbed so high you could barely see the ground. A year after that night, Marcus stood at the opening of the Blake Foundation's newest initiative, free community grocery programs in 20 cities across America. David and Emma were there, special guests at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Emma, now 7 and growing fast, wore a dress Marcus's assistant had picked out, and she held her father's hand with pride. When it was time for speeches, Marcus looked out at the crowd of reporters and community members and employees and donors, but his eyes found David and Emma first. A year ago, Marcus began, I watched a good man return a gallon of milk because he couldn't afford it. I watched his daughter try to understand why she couldn't have something so simple. And in that moment, I remembered being that little girl. I remember my own father returning milk because we were poor. I'd spent 40 years running from that memory, building wealth so I'd never be that poor again. He paused, emotion thick in his throat. But I realized something that night. The promise I should have made wasn't to never be poor. It was to never forget what poverty feels like, to never walk past someone struggling when I had the power to help. This foundation exists because a man named David and his daughter Emma reminded me what matters. Not profit margins or stock prices or Forbes rankings, but whether people can afford milk for their children. The crowd applauded, but Marcus wasn't finished. We all have the power to help. It doesn't take billions of dollars. It takes seeing people, really seeing them, recognizing their humanity, treating their struggles with dignity, and helping when we can, in whatever way we can. Because we're all one bad day, one drained bank account, one unexpected expense away from being the person returning milk at a grocery store. After the ceremony, Emma ran up to Marcus and hugged him. "Thank you for remembering us," she said. "Thank you for reminding me," Marcus replied, "of who I'm supposed to be." David shook Marcus's hand, and in that handshake was understanding. Two men who'd been brought together by circumstance and kindness, who'd changed each other's lives in ways neither had expected. That evening, Marcus drove past a Fresh Mart. He pulled into the parking lot and sat for a moment, watching people come and go with their groceries. Some walked out with full carts, some with very little, all of them with stories, struggles, hopes, and dreams. And Marcus realized that the truest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch, the dignity we preserve, the kindness we show when no one's watching and nothing's in it for us. His father would have been proud, not of the billions, but of this, of Marcus finally understanding what actually matters. Sometimes we think we're helping others when really they're saving us, reminding us that beneath all our success and wealth, we're still the children who needed help, who remember what it felt like to return milk, who promised to never forget, and then did, until someone small and struggling holds up a mirror and shows us who we become and who we need to be again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video. It helps us share more beautiful stories like this one. Kindly drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I like to know what part of the world engages with my story. Oh, also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel Deep Cut Stories for more emotional stories about love, kindness, and fate that'll touch your heart deeply. Thank you for watching.